Abba Yahuah, I just want to thank you, my King. Oh, Father, what a privilege that we have in order to be able to come and sit at your feet. Abba Yahuah, I just want to thank you, my Father. I thank you for these lessons that we are learning, that every week these lessons unfold in order to show us a little bit more, not only about Abraham's life, but about our lives in what we do. That's no different to Abraham. And once again, we see the faithfulness of who you are and how you go about doing things. But at the same time, we see that Abraham, a mighty prophet, where in this lesson we hear you for the first time say that he is a prophet. A mighty prophet, a set-apart man for you, and yet we see how real he is. How he is a man no different to what we are, in where we also stumble and fall. A man who, by this time, with so many chapters behind us, would have known that he's walked with you, would have known that you have spoken, came face to face with you, yet still there is that testing and trialing going on inside of him, where he's still being approved, where he's still being able to go through that test to be able to truly come to know who you are. Because this is why you take us through the trials and why you take us through the tests. You take us through trials and tests so that you can expose the evil within us. You can expose the weaknesses within us. You can expose the sin that is still lying dormant sometimes within us that we can't even see. But with every trial and with every test, there is something that needs to be revealed. And it's you revealing yourself and you revealing ourselves to ourselves, so that we may understand that we still have a way to go in order to truly trust you. And this is what this teaching is about today. That tonight we are going to be able to see that we've seen chapter 12 where you have spoken to him. We've seen chapter 15 where you made covenant with him. We've seen chapter 17. We've seen chapter 18 where all these chapters we have seen where you have been walking a path with him. And yet at the end of the day, we see how frail he still is, how fragile he still is. And that is the journey of a leader. We don't just arrive. We have to go through the process to truly become the great man of faith that Abraham is called in later chapters in the Bible. But did he start as a great man of faith? No, he did not. And so, Father, I am so thankful and I am so grateful that there are these accounts in the Bible and these stories in the Bible and these realities in the Bible in order to be able to show us, in order to be able to teach us, in order to be able to show us that we too are fragile in your hand, that we too have not arrived, that we too are on a journey with you. And therefore, we do not need to feel guilty. We do not need to feel condemned. We do not need to listen to the voice of the enemy when we mess up that comes and tells us how bad we are and how we've missed the plot and how we're not going to get there, because we need to understand that we are walking a path with you and we have not arrived. And you know what? We are on a journey and we will never arrive until the time that you finally come, because we are growing from glory to glory. And if there was any man that is an example to show us this, that is Abraham. My goodness, he's come with you face to face. He's had covenant cut with you, where you have spoken to him and made a covenant with him. You have spoken to him more than once. Then you've appeared to him, physically appeared to him, given him the promise. Yet, in his flesh, he reveals the weakness that is still there. And so I thank you, Abba Father. I thank you for your love. I thank you for your grace. I thank you for your mercy. I thank you that you are so loving and so kind, that you walk with us step by step, that even when we stumble and we fall, your loving hands come and pick us up and help us back on the journey. We do not need to listen to the devil's words of condemnation and guilt, but instead we listen to your voice, encouraging us along the path that you have put before us. And so I thank you, Abba Father. I thank you for these teachings that you're giving us, Father, for us to understand that we truly are victorious with our Messiah, Yahuah, who has already paid the price for us, and we have nothing to fear in anything, as now we are even one step ahead of Abraham. And so I thank you, Abba Father, that I can commit this time to you right now. And I thank you that you will lead us and continue to guide us and continue to teach us and continue to open up the mind of our understanding so that we can have the deeper revelation of the things that you want to show us and your heart that you want to show us in this word. And so I praise, okay, and so I praise and I thank you for this in Yeshua's name. Amen. Okay, here we have, I do have perfect signal, and this of you on my side is fine. So, can everybody hear me? Okay. So, we are just going to recap a little bit on last week. And so last week, we really looked at the lesson of where Lot, where the angels came to Lot, and where Lot had a visitation. And these angels came, and they came to Sodom, and it was Gomorrah that really went into burning, and we looked at the fact that Sodom means burning. And we had a look and we saw that the angels tell Lot to be able to go and warn his people, because we had a big discussion last week, which was very interesting, about the fact that when Lot is told to be able to, he must hand over these men because they want them, and then Lot offers up his daughters. And then afterwards, someone shared with me, Marinda shared with me, an amazing insight that made a lot of sense to me. And the insight was, you see, if Lot would have offered himself, then that means he would have stood against the very thing that he had been speaking and warning them at the city gates. If he had given himself, then he himself would have stood against the word of Yahuah in terms of the sodomy that Sodom and Gomorrah stood for. So if Lot was going to be able to, because we looked last week and we said, why did he offer his daughters? Why did he not offer himself? You see, the problem that was there was the sodomy that was the problem. It wasn't the fact that they wanted the woman. It was the fact that they wanted the men. And remember, Lot was at the city gates acting as a judge, and he was constantly having to judge them, because we saw in Genesis 19 verses 9 where he says that you are forever judging us. You always judge. You're always judging us. So you see, Lot was there, but he was a voice warning the people of their wickedness. Yet he didn't leave, stayed on living with them, but he would have stood up against what they were standing for. So when they came to want to be able to take him, and they wanted the men, then we said, why didn't he give himself? If he did that, he would have stood against what was being already taught to them, coming down from Abraham, coming down from Noah. Remember, Abraham was being taught the ways of the Father. And for Abraham to be taught the ways of the Father, it would have meant that you cannot go and sleep with another male or a female. If you are a male, you do not sleep with a male, because that was the sodomy of what was going on. So he offered his daughters because that was the right thing to do. That is what they should have been doing. You are to have a relation with a woman, not with a man. So that was another way of being able to look at the fact that Lot knew what was right to do. And he didn't stand for the evil of what they were doing. And then we saw how the angels came and they said, we are here to destroy the city. If you have anyone, go and tell them that they are to get out. And then in verse 14 we see how Lot went out and he spoke to his sons-in-law who had married his daughters. Now understand, this is a betrothal. It's not the consummation of the marriage because the girls were still virgins, but it's a betrothal. And he said, get up, get out of the place, for Yahuah is going to destroy this city. But look at what they do. Instead, they laugh at him. They seem to be as one joking. So they didn't take him serious. And you see, that's what always happens when there is calamity going to come, and the father raises up a prophet, or the father raises up a servant, or the father raises up a watchman who starts to warn the people. They think they're joking. They don't want to listen. They don't want to heed to the warning. And there's warnings going out, and there's warnings that have been going out even with Noah. Noah was warning the people for how many years? He warned the people that the destruction was going to come. And he was building this ark because the rain was going to come. But did the people listen? No. Did they repent? No. Because this is the wickedness of the hearts of the people. They want to stay where they are, and they want to enjoy what they do, and they don't want to change, and they don't want to leave their sinful ways. And then in verses 16 we saw an interesting word, which is the word, and while he loitered. So then in the morning the messengers urged Lot to hurry. So now they're urging him, they're saying, hurry up, we need to get out. Get up, take your wife and your daughters, and we need to get out of the city, because he was going to punish them. But what did he do? He loitered. The men took hold of his hand and his wife's hand, and the hands of his two daughters, Yahuah having compassion on him, and they brought him out and set him outside the city. So you see, we looked at this and we said, how many of us at that time, when the urgency comes, and maybe the Father sends the angel before us to bring us to the place that he has prepared, and that we ourselves are maybe going to be able to loiter. And what is that word loiter? It means he lingered. It means he delayed. It means he tarried. It means he hesitated. So why was he hesitating? He had already gone to warn them. He knew that the angels had said that the destruction was coming. Why was he hesitating? Because there was still a level of him that was hoping that it was going to be all fine. Now this is a warning in the time that we are in right now, that there is going to be things that is going to start unfolding upon this earth. You see, most people want us to be able to take this sting thing that's being offered us. For what reason? So that their lives can go back to normal. So they persecute us and they get upset with us. And why do they do that? Because they want the world to go back to normal. You will hear them always say, if everybody would just get the sting, then we would eventually get back to normal. But we need to understand, we're never going to go back to the way it was. And that was already a word the Father gave me in 2019 in October when he said to me, the world, the way you know it, will never be the same again. And we are not going to go back to the way it was before as much as we would want it to be like that. Because if that be the case, then Yahuah cannot come. Everything that is in place must work out the way it needs to work out for Yahuah to be able to come. And so, even in that, we saw that when the men, even now I'm just being reminded, when they put him into the house, they closed the door. Remember, when the angels were trying to come over, they wanted to take over Lot, the angels closed the door. As Yahuah closed the door and they could not get in, and then he brought blindness on them. The same as the door that he closes, no man's going to open. He will protect you from the evil that is outside. He locks you in. Yahuah, he will be with you. And he's the one who closes the door. In the Church of Philadelphia, it says, the door that he closes, no man opens. And the door that he opens, no man can close. But here we see how Lot was delaying. He was reluctant and he was hesitant. Why? So then they say that he turns around and he says that they are not to look back. They are to leave. They are to, because in verse 17 it says, and it came to be that when they had brought them outside, he said, escape for your life. Do not look behind you, nor stay anywhere in the plain. Escape to the mountains, lest you be consumed. Now even here then Lot starts to ask them, please, in verses 19, please, if your servant has found favor in your eyes, help us that we don't have to go to the mountains, but that we may still go to the city. You see, Lot's biggest problem all along, remember, when Abraham stood with him and said, you can choose any land, he went to the lush green place of the city. And it's in the city where the destruction was. It's in the city where the evil is. And here again, Lot is still holding on to that thing of the city. He's still not ready to let go of his city life. He enjoys the luxuries that the city has to give him. And that is why we need to understand, when the Father says go, we are not to look back. We are to go forward. We are to forget that which is behind, and we are to move forward to where he's got to go. Now you must understand, there will be those that when the Father says go, if they're still going to hesitate and they're not going to go, they will be destroyed. There are those that will go with only the clothes in their back because they didn't go ahead of time, because they didn't hear correct. Lot didn't have to be in the circumstance. Lot could have been dwelling with Abraham, or just near Abraham. He didn't need to be in the city. He chose to be there. So we looked and we saw that after that he takes them into this. Eventually he goes to the mountains. He goes to the city but then lands up going back to the mountains. And what happens to his wife? She looks back, longing for what she's left behind. Looking back, longing for what she had left behind. And she turns into a pillar of salt. Are we to look back to when the Father says, go, look ahead? He leads you by the hand. How can you look in a rearview mirror when you got to drive and go forward? You cannot be looking in the rearview mirror when you're driving a car. When you're driving a car, if you look in the rearview mirror, you're going to crash. You got to look ahead of you. You got to look at the path ahead of you. Do not look back at what you got to leave behind, because at the end of the day, you will crash. You got to look ahead. You got to look at what he's put before you. He's the one who takes you by the hand. He's the one who's going to lead you into the promise that he has made. He's the one who's going to take you. And you got to trust him, and you got to believe that he's with you. And then they go into the mountains, and unfortunately, where did they get this wine? Where did they bring the wine with them? Because when they ran out of Sodom, did they take anything with them? He grabbed them by the hands and they ran. Now they got wine, and the daughters make the father drunk, and then they bring forth 2 sons. They both fall pregnant with the father's children. And then this is where we see the Moabites come forth from there, and then the children of Ammon come forth from there. And today we know they are still the enemy of Israel. And today we're going to look further into lesson 28. And we are going to have a look at chapter 20. And in chapter 20, we look and we see that Abram set out to the south, to the land of the south. And he goes to Kadesh, and he goes and Shur, and stayed in Gerar. Now, if we look at that word Kadesh, that's holy. Shur is a wall to travel, and Gerar is a lodging place, a drag away to chew the cud. That's the origin of that word. In Genesis chapter 20 verses 2 it says, and Abraham said, concerning Sarah his wife, she's my sister. Here we go again. History repeating itself. From where? From chapter 12. Because in chapter 12, remember, they had a famine. And where did they need to go? They needed to go into Egypt. And what does he do? He tells the Pharaoh that it is his sister. And he tells Sarah that she's to tell them that she is his sister, which is not truly a lie, because it's like a little bit of a white lie. So there's truth in it. She is his sister. They just don't have the same, it's either mother, father, we'll see tonight. And so it's not totally a lie. But you see, you've got to look at the roots of why does he say this. Why does he say this? This is the root, because we're back to the same root as where we were in chapter 12. But how many chapters from there? How far have we come from there? Because by chapter 15, he's made a covenant with him. He's cut covenant with him. He's told him, walk the land, and this land I give you. By chapter 17, we see he changes his name and calls him Abraham. By chapter 18, he's revealed himself to him in person. And here we are now. So we would think that by this time, Abraham should really know who Abba Yahuah is. So you see, there's room for all of us. And we must not be so puffed up in thinking that we've arrived. Because we can all fall. And we can all make mistakes. Just like Abraham. And it says, and Abraham said concerning Sarah his wife, she's my sister. And Abimelech, sovereign of Gerar, sent and took Sarah. Now understand, by this time you need to understand the importance of what's going on over here. By chapter 18, he's had a visitation of Yahushua himself. Yahushua has visited him. Yahuah has come in the form of his son. He has sat down at a table. He has served this Yahushua, who is Yahuah in the flesh. And he's told him his wife is going to become pregnant with a child. So if he's truly believed that she's going to become pregnant with a child, how on earth could he give her to a man when he has told him she's going to bear a child? She's changed her name. She's become Sarah, and she's going to bear a child. And he's even given him the child's name. He's going to be called Isaac, Yitzhak. But how on earth? Because of the fear that he has of man, what does he do? Where are we in our lives? How many promises has the Father given us? And because we will fear man, we will bow our knee to man. And because of that, we are willing to be able to fear man above fearing the Father. And look what happens in verse 3. But the Yahuah came to Abimelech in a dream by night and said to him, see, you are a dead man. Oh my goodness. You are a dead man because of the woman whom you have taken, for she is a man's wife. Now, I want you to understand something. You know, you have a promise from the Father, and sometimes, even in your going astray, Father is still working on your behalf to make sure that that vision is going to come to pass. Because in this case, Father is working on Abraham's behalf, even when Abraham has messed up. Father is making sure that his promise is still going to come to pass. So I need you to understand that even though you might mess up, I need you to understand that when the Father has given you a promise, and when the Father has said to you, this is my promise, that even when you mess up, he's still able to work on your behalf. Because he will fulfill his purpose and his plan. Understand, a lot is at stake here. There's an entire generation that is at stake here. And it's going to come from the birth of a child that needs to come from the loins, that needs to come from Abraham and not from Abimelech. And here we see verse 4, however, Abimelech had not come near her and said, Yahuah, would you kill a righteous nation also? Did he not say to me, she is my sister? And even she herself said, he is my brother. So understand, it's not only Abraham that has sinned, but he's now caused her to sin. Because he's told her that she must lie. That in his eyes and in her eyes is not quite a lie. But they're just trying to save themselves. In the integrity of my heart, and in the innocence of my hands, I have done this. And Yahuah said to him in a dream, yes, I know that you did this in your integrity of your heart. And so I kept you from sinning against me. Wow. How faithful is Abba Yahuah. That Abba Yahuah can actually keep you from sinning against him. He will put things in your path. He will bring the dream. Look at what he did, even when it was with Balaam and Balak and the donkey. Doesn't he get the donkey to speak, to rebuke him, so that he doesn't go astray? Father will put many obstacles in our path in order for us to be able to do what is in his will. But how many times do we actually see his hand in what he's doing? How many times do we really listen? Do we actually understand that many times when there is an obstacle in our path, it's because Father is trying to protect us from something that might be there that's going to cause us to stumble. And yet we will bulldoze over that, and we will pray it, and we will pray it until we have our way. And we do that. And yet Father was putting an obstacle here, showing a dream to warn him. But how many times does sometimes Father show us things and we are not willing to listen? Because we don't like what is being done. We don't like the way that it's going. And therefore we want our way. And we will pray what we want. And we go against what the Father's trying to do in the long run. So, verse 7, and now return the man's wife, for he is a prophet. So yeah, for the first time, Father is saying, Abraham is a prophet. And now imagine, this is when I have to chuckle to myself, and many years when I've read this, it always fascinates me. Abraham is the one who's done wrong. Abraham is the one who deserves the discipline. Because Abraham is the one who's actually gone astray. But now Father gets Abraham to pray for Abimelech, to release him from the curse that has come upon him. We need to understand something. When Father calls a servant, Father has an anointing upon that servant. And even when that servant may stumble and fall, he has not changed his call on that servant. And Father will still work through that servant to fulfill his purpose and his plan. Now we could stand up against Abraham, and many times this is what people do. They stand up against the anointed of the Father because maybe there was a moment of weakness just like Abraham. But Father didn't change his plan. Father didn't change his promise on him. He was still Father's anointed and appointed prophet. That was to bring about his purpose and his plan. And so we need to understand, we all have weaknesses and we will all fall. It doesn't mean to say that Father is going to change his plan just because he messed up. It didn't change the plan that the Father had called Abraham to be the leader that he chose, to be the anointed and the appointed that was going to bring forth his promise that he had spoken. He knew Abraham's weakness in his flesh. So the Father understands your weakness in your flesh. And I need you to understand today, just because you stumble and you fall, just because you maybe go astray, please do not listen to the voice of the devil, who's going to maybe put you down and put his foot on your neck and say to you, well, now you know what, you've just lost it. Dust yourself off, pick yourself up, put your eyes back on your Messiah, Yeshua Messiah, as he leads you by the hand and takes you deeper into his plan. And so he says, but if you do not return her, know that you shall certainly die. So you see, Father was very serious about what needed to be done here. This man needed to understand very clearly that this woman is not to be touched, that this woman is to be returned back to Abraham. Abraham is the one who's going to pray for him and bless him, in case this man maybe want to kill Abraham for what he's done. He needed him to understand, you are not going to touch the servant of mine. You are not going to speak up against the servant of mine. And you are not going to touch him either. Because understand, Abimelech could have got upset to want to maybe even kill him for what he's done. And you and all that are yours. So he's not only going to kill him, he's going to say, know that you shall die, you and all that are yours. So Abimelech rose early in the morning and called all his servants and spoke all these words in their hearing. And the men were greatly frightened. You see, do we have the fear of Yahuah? When Yahuah speaks, when we have the revelation that Yahuah is the one who is speaking, that Yahuah is the one who's in charge, do we fear Yahuah? Because this is the key here. You see, the key here is who you're going to fear. And this is the lesson for today. The lesson for today is, who do we fear? Do we fear Abba Yahuah or do we fear man? You see, Abraham feared man, and because of he feared man, he fell. Abimelech feared Yahuah, and because he feared Yahuah, he did what was right. And not only him, but those who were with him that feared. And so therefore, if we go look at Luke chapter 12, let's just look at Luke chapter 12, because it's important for us to understand that Father is quite serious about whom we should fear. And this is why it's important that we learn the lesson that we need to learn, because this is a lesson that we need to learn. This is the second time this lesson is presenting itself. This is the second time he's writing this test. And we need to understand that the days ahead, we need to understand, who are we going to fear? Are we going to fear man that is going to maybe throw us into prison? Are we going to fear man that's maybe going to be able to tell us that you may not be able to buy, you may not be able to sell, you may not be able to have any finances, you may not be able to have anything, and if you don't have this, you are not going to be able to survive? So we need to understand, who are we going to fear? Because remember, fear presents itself in different ways. Now listen to what it says in Luke chapter 12 from verses 4. But I say to you, my friends, do not be afraid of those who kill the body. Okay, so this is the lesson for us today to understand. My friends, do not be afraid of those who will kill the body. So did he need to be afraid that they were going to take his wife and kill him? Did he need to be afraid? How many promises does he have from him? He had already made a mistake in chapter 12 with the Pharaoh. He'd already made this mistake. By chapter 15, he's already now been given the covenant. By chapter 17, he's calling him again, reinstating the covenant with him, telling him the covenant of circumcision And by this time, he's changing his name to Abraham and putting his breath in him. And he's telling him, you are to fear me and you are to walk before me. And you are to be perfect. Now we get to chapter 20. By chapter 18, Yahuah has appeared to him himself, given him the promise himself. Not just a voice, but in person. You see, we need to understand, because by the time we're going to get to the next 2 chapters down the line, he's going to have to be faithful in what the Father's going to ask him to do. So you see, all of this is leading up to his walking, becoming a faithful servant. So listen to what he says in Luke 12 from verses 4. And he says, but I say to you, my friends, do not be afraid of those who kill the body, and after that unable to do any more. So if they're just going to kill your body, so what? To die is to gain. To die is to live with him. If you're going to die in the flesh, you're going to be with him, provided you are walking with him and provided you are one of his people. But I shall show you whom you should fear. Fear the one who after killing possesses authority to cast into Gehenna. Yes, I say to you, fear him. So, you see, if you're going to fear man and bow your knee to man, understand, the one that you're fearing, if you fear him, you have the fullness of salvation. But he's saying, fear the one that when you die, he's the one that has the authority of where he's going to send you. That's the one that you are to fear. And then he says in verse 6, are not 5 sparrows sold for 2 copper coins, and not one of them is forgotten before Allah? But even the hairs of his head have been numbered. Do not fear. You are worth more than many sparrows. So what do we have to fear? Abba Yahuah is the one who holds us in the palm of his hand. He's given us Messiah Yahuah, who's the one who's gone before us. He's the one leading us. He's the one guiding us. He's the one who's given us now the Ruach of Yahuah, who lives within us, so that he can reside within us, saying, this is the way, walk you in it. So understand, who are we going to fear? And this is the lesson that we need to understand today, because these are the things that are going to play out before us in the days ahead. Everything of what we are going through right now is to be able to equip us. Father has not started us in the beginning for us to be able to just read the Bible because it's good to read the Bible. No, he is equipping us for the days ahead. This is our foundation. This is the foundation that is already set before us. So, in verses 9, and Abimelech called Abraham and said to him, what have you done to us? In what have I sinned against you, that you have brought on me and on my reign a great sin? You have done matters to me that should not be done. Now, you need to be reminded, we all need to be reminded, that our sin doesn't only affect us. Our sin affects those around us. When one leader falls, how many people fall with them? When one leader goes astray, how many people can go astray with them? So we always have to understand that we need to walk circumspectly before the Father. Why? We need to fear him, because when we fear him, the fear of him, the awe of him, the respect of him, that respect that we have for him. You know, with our parents, it's not that we needed to fear them, but we had fear for them because we had to respect them, because we knew if they told us to do something and we didn't do it, there was a consequence going to come for that. I mean, I remember how many times when my mother would say to me, just wait until your father gets home. Wait until your father gets home. I'm going to discuss the matter with him. Oh my goodness, for the rest of the afternoon, that was not a good afternoon. For the rest of the time, just me thinking that when my father comes, now he's the one who's going to discipline me. Don't worry about my mother's little bit of discipline, because that was nothing in comparison to the discipline that I'm going to get from my father. But now we want to sit and make the father our friend. Do you understand? We want to lose the respect that we have for Abba Yahuah. And therefore we do not fear him and we do not respect him. To know that the very one that we are going to come up against will discipline us. And so this sin is able to affect, our sin is able to affect others. The only reason why we're seeing a different side of Yah is because the Father has got a promise on Abraham, and the Father's walking with Abraham, and the Father's teaching Abraham. But he needed to teach Abimelech to understand, you better obey me, because if you don't, I will destroy you. Don't worry about what Abraham's going to do. Worry about what I'm going to do to you. And so, verse 10 says, and Abimelech said to Abraham, what did you have in view that you have done this matter? Now you see, here we get the crux of the matter in verse 11. And Abraham said, only because I said to myself. You see, how many times you have conversations with yourself? Do the conversation with yourself that you sit and you doubt yourself. And guess what? When you have a conversation with yourself, sometimes there's another one speaking with you. And he's going to put a little doubt in your mind. So if you're going to have a conversation with yourself, better be careful that you rather than speak back to the Father and have him speak to you than you're having a conversation with yourself. And then the enemy comes and adds to that conversation. You see, now listen. Only because I said to myself, the fear of Yahuah is not in this place. Okay, so because the fear of Yahuah is not in this place, he would not fear him. So now he says, the fear of Yahuah is not in this place. So because the fear of Yahuah is not in this place, let me say that my wife is my sister. Because these people don't fear Yahuah. So because they don't fear Yahuah, then they're going to be able to do something to me. What was the conversation supposed to have been? Oh, they don't fear the Yahuah. But you know what? It's fine because I have a covenant with him. He's just told me that my wife is going to fall pregnant. So I don't need anything to fear. Because even though they don't fear him, I am going to show them what the fear of Yahuah looks like by staying faithful to my Father. Just like he did with the king of Sodom when he went and rescued Lot by not taking the spoils, by bringing glory to the Father. Only because I said to myself, the fear of Yahuah is not in this place, and they shall kill me for the sake of my wife. Okay. So now I want you to go maybe in the days ahead. They may be you in a position when they may be going to maybe kill your wife. They may be going to kill your children. And you are in this position of saying, well, you know what? Maybe I should just bow down to the system so that I can save my wife, so that I can save my children. Or maybe I should just bow down to the system so that I can save my life because that's what I need to do in order to save my life. Do you see? These are the things that are going to present us. Do you see how Abraham had the fear of man after everything that the Father has done? So I need you to understand this tonight very clearly. We might all have walked with the Father. We might have had a visitation of him. We might have, he's shown us visions and dreams. We have promises. We have everything. But you do not know the day of when a test is going to present itself in such a way that how are you going to behave? Because this is not a man that has not walked with the Father. This is a man that up until now, he really understands the faithfulness of Yahuah. He has seen what Yahuah has done. He has had the promise of Yahuah, and he's had Yahuah himself speak to him. But yet, what does the fear of man do? The fear of man can cripple you to such a degree that you will want to save your life. And by you trying to save your life, you're going to lose it in the end. So that is why I needed you to understand Luke chapter 12. Who shall we fear? Fear the one that not only has the authority to kill the body, but the one who decides your destiny after that. Because he's the one who decides where you go. And yet she is truly my sister. She is the daughter of my father, but not the daughter of my mother. So you see, they had the same father, but not the same mother. And she became my wife. And it came to be, so you see, because of that, he thought it was justifiable to say, it's okay. But remember, the justifying that you do is going to expose the root of the sin that is really there. Because the root of the sin was not the lie. The root of the sin was the fear. And it came to be when Yahuah caused me to wander from my father's house, that I said to her, this is your loving commitment that you should do for me in every place, wherever you go. Say of me, he is my brother. So you see, now not only did he sin, but he causes those that are with him to sin. So be wary that maybe in the days ahead, you might even cause maybe your family members to sin too, by your words, because of your fear. So how many family members have encouraged and caused their own family members to take a sting because of their own fear? How many? This is what we need to understand. And then Abimelech took sheep and cattle and male and female servants and gave them to Abraham. And he returned Sarah his wife to him. And Abimelech said, see, my land is before you. Dwell wherever it is good in your eyes. And to Sarah he said, see, I have given your brother 1,000 pieces of silver. Wow, imagine this. Abraham is the one who does wrong. And Abraham once again is being released with a blessing. He's going with a blessing. You see, our Father is able to, even though he sees our sinful nature, even though he sees that we fall. But you know what is so wonderful about our Father? He doesn't see where you are. He already sees the finished product. And that is what's so beautiful about Abba Yahuah. If only we could see people like that. If only we could see people that sometimes you might be a wife who maybe has a husband who's maybe not quite where he needs to be. Or maybe you are a husband who has a wife she's not quite where she needs to be. Or maybe you are a mother, or maybe you are a father, or maybe you have a child that is not quite where he needs to be. But he's maybe got a promise from the Father. And maybe that husband or maybe that wife, there is a promise. But all you can see is where they are right now. And you cannot see beyond the promise that is there of where the Father is the one who is going to bring them to be what they are. And instead, you can only see where they are right now. And you see that place where they're stuck in their sin. But even in that place, Father will still bless them. And you cannot understand. But I want you to see today that the Father sees way beyond where those people are. Father sees the finished product. Father saw Abraham's finished product. He didn't see where Abraham was right now. He didn't see where Abraham had fallen once again in the same sin that he had already fallen a few chapters ago, a few years ago, quite a few years ago. You would have thought that by now he should have learned his lesson. But do you see Abba Yahuah's compassion? Do you see his love? Do you see his grace? But why can we sometimes not show that same love and that same grace? because it's difficult for us. Because in our flesh is no good thing. But that is why the Father needs to give us the eyes of the Spirit, to be able to help us to see things through the Spirit. So I want to encourage you today. I want to encourage. There might be one of you listening right now that maybe has a family member, maybe has a friend, maybe your wife, maybe your husband, maybe your child, whatever it is, whoever it is, whatever the circumstance is right now that you find yourself in. And you are so busy looking at that circumstance where you find yourself right now that you cannot see beyond what Father's wanting to do in your life. He's just taking you through a test. And there's going to be an outcome on the other side. There's going to be His promise, because we saw He's the one who showed the dream. That's why sometimes I pray, I say, oh Father, please reveal yourself to them in a dream. Please reveal yourself to them in a vision. Please put the fear of Yahuah in them. You see, if the fear of Yahuah did not come upon Abimelech, he would not have done what the Father wanted him to do. And so we need to trust Abba Yahuah, that He's got every situation under control. And if we surrender that person to the Father, Father is able to do over and above and beyond what you can do. He's able to take charge of the situation. But if you are still continuing to try and sort it out in your flesh, I guarantee you, it's not going to happen. And I tell you, if you want to go watch yourself an excellent story, we watched it, I don't know if it was Sunday night. We watched The Pineapple Garden. Elsie had it on her computer, and we were able to put it on, of a missionary. It's called The Pineapple Garden. And I tell you something, if you can watch this Pineapple Garden story, you will understand the level to what you need to surrender. And that which you're going to try and hold on to, you're going to lose it. But that which you let go of and you give to the Father, He's the one who's able to make it come to pass. So all Father is trying to teach Abraham is that he needs to learn to trust Him. He needs to learn to surrender to Him. He needs to learn to believe Him and take Him at His word. And that no matter what, he doesn't need to fear the people. He needs to fear Yahuah. And so Abraham, now look at verses 17. So Abraham prayed to Yahuah, and Yahuah healed Abimelech and his wife and his female servants, so they bore children. Now imagine the one that is actually the one that sinned, because he's still the Father's prophet, because he still has the call on his life, because the Father knows what He's going to do with him. He's going to use him to be the one to bless the people. And he needed to show Abimelech the Father's power, who the Father is, through Abraham's life. To show the Father's loving kindness, to show the Father's grace. And he needed to show Abimelech that even though Abraham did wrong, he was still his servant. And Abimelech was going to need to know this, because we're going to see the next chapter, when it comes to this well story, we are going to have to understand that Abimelech needs to respect and honor Abraham. And so we must understand that the Father is teaching us deep revelations here. It's not just the fact that we're having to read our Bible and going into these stories because we just, it's a good thing to do right now. Father is wanting to reveal Himself to us, to say, my children, you need to understand these are lessons for your life. You see, that is why the Torah is our foundation. It's a foundation. And that is why people do not know Abba Father intimately the way that they should, because they choose to do away with this reading the beginning of the Bible, and they start only at the New Testament. I need you to understand that this, what we call the Old Testament, which I don't call the Old Testament, I call it our foundational covenant. Because unless you understand these stories, that is how you come to know the Father's heart. How do you come to know who your Father is? How do you come to understand how your Father goes about doing things, unless you start to become intimate with Him through understanding that He's no different, the same Father, the way He has dealt with His servants in this Bible is no different to have to deal with us. He's no different. He's the same yesterday, today, and forever. And so, if He has a promise in your life, even if you mess up, He's still going to help you. All you need to do, stop having a conversation with yourself in a negative way, to allow the enemy to come and torment you, because that's what he will do. The conversation that you're going to have with yourself better be thoughts centered back on the Father. Because if it's not going to be a thought that is centered back on the Father, the enemy will take you to the cleaners. And I know, because I've gone through this one too many times in my life. And so, praise Abba Yahuah. We are going to stop here tonight, as I feel that this is what we needed to be able to understand tonight. We needed to go a little bit deeper in the understanding of what the Father wanted us to be able to understand in this teaching tonight, that it is about the comparison between who are we fearing. The understanding that it doesn't matter how long you have walked with the Father, you can still stumble. Because at the end of the day, the tests will still present themselves. The problem is, many of us cannot even discern a test anymore, because we've sometimes become so puffed up in our own importance of thinking that we've arrived, that we can't even discern that we are being tested. And so, may Abba Yahuah grant us the grace that we need in the days ahead, to be able to understand that even though we might just mess up, we need to pick up the pieces, stand tall, but also at the same time get to a place of when how many times are we going to go around the same mountain? How many times are we going to continue to listen to the lies of the enemy? Some of you have been sitting and the enemy has been lying to you for so long that you are so down, because you have listened to the enemy's lies for so long that you can't even believe that the Father will be able to do anything in your life, because you seem so far from that promise that He gave you. Do not look at where you are right now. Look at the promise that's been given to you. Put your eyes back on your King and go back to your first love. Cultivate your relationship with Him and love on Him. Focus on Him. And then the things of this world will grow strangely dim, and He will lead you to your promised land. Let us pray. Abba Yahuah, I just want to thank You, my Father. Oh, Father, when I sit and I read through these pages of this Bible, I realize how faithful You are. You know, it's one thing for us to turn around and say that You are faithful. But it's another thing for us to be able to actually experience by experience, just as Abraham experienced by experience, that You are faithful. And I don't think that there's one person that would be listening to the sound of my voice that hasn't at some stage in their lives experienced your faithfulness. Not one. Because you are an Abba Father. And you love us so much. You only have good thoughts towards us. That even when we mess up, you still have good thoughts towards us. But we seem to think that somehow you will now have bad thoughts towards us. Because that's what the enemy wants us to believe. But he is a liar. You do not change your stand with us. You do not change the way you feel for us. You are the creator of the universe, and you have breathed life into us, and we are created in your image. How can you not love that which you yourself created? And if we, being parents, even when our children mess up, if we still love our children, how much more you? How much more you? But forgive us, Abba Yahuah, where we put you in a category that we cannot see you like that. That we seem to think that now you don't love us anymore. You don't care for us anymore, just because we go through some kind of a test. But yet we as parents know how to discipline our children when they do go astray. But yet we do not expect you to discipline us. Oh, how we do not understand you. How we have no concept of the way you work and how you do things. And I thank you for these testimonies in this Bible so that we can start to come to know you a little bit deeper, and so that we understand that you are such a faithful Father that even when we mess up, you are still faithful. And so I thank you for this teaching, Father. Help us, my King. Help us to be able to dust ourselves from that place where we might find ourselves feeling rejected, feeling low, feeling abandoned, feeling like we no longer hear your voice, or wherever it is that we might find ourselves. Or maybe us looking at loved ones or people that we are expecting to behave differently and they still don't, that we trust you enough to be the one to do it in your appointed time. Because that is what we will read next week. Sarah bore a child in your appointed time. Everything is in your appointed time. So I praise and I thank you for this time, my Father. Thank you that we can be your children. Thank you that you're teaching us to be little children that can come and trust you, sit at your feet, have you lead us step by step, and teaching us what it means to be intimate with you. I praise and I thank you for this in Yeshua's name. Amen.